Welcome to Purdue Global's first event for 2020-25. My name is Professor Jody Levitt, and I'm very excited for everybody to be here. Yes, it's echoing. One second. Okay. Is that better? No. We'll see what happens. Hopefully it's the only problem tonight. I am from the Public Safety Club, and we are presenting our first mental health and criminal justice event. And without further ado, I would like to introduce Alex Schneider from the Public Safety, our president.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Professor Levitt. It's great to have everyone here. I'm excited about the event, and like all of you know, this is a well-needed topic, especially in criminal justice field. So I'm excited. Everyone here, we have good attendance so far, and I'm looking forward to sharing it further in the classroom. If you want to join us, join our discussion posts, see what's new, what's coming up. We'd love to have you. So welcome, enjoy the event. I'm going to pass it on to Catherine Sellers.
Hello, everyone, and thank you. I have an echo too. No? Okay. Well, first, I will be the moderator, and I would like to first introduce our esteemed panelists. We have Christine Kinney, who's the Deputy Coroner of Berkeley County. We have Detective Sergeant Jonathan Salmi, Police Department, Northbrook, Illinois. Dr. Sherry Schwartz from Forensic Psychologist. Judge Emma Smith, Superior Court Judge, Riverside County, California. And Professor Karen Watson, Course Lead and Faculty Mentor here at Purdue Global. Welcome to our panelists and to all of our attendees. With this in mind, I'm just going to get it started off. And Christine, you're lucky number one.
Great.
And I'm going to ask you, how do you approach cases where mental health issues such as suicide or substance use disorders may have contributed to the cause of death?
Well, well, first of all, if we have a drug related, we know that it's drug or alcohol related. We are Narcan distributors, so we leave Narcan at every scene that we have that we know that's a drug death, or if we feel that there is drug use in the house or anything like that, we always leave that. So that's first and foremost. For suicides, unfortunately, by the time we make it there, the mental health issue is surpass what it needs to be. And, unfortunately, a lot of these people don't get the help that they need. Our issue right now is we have veteran suicide. That's our big thing right now, unfortunately. And we do have the Veteran Administrative and the VA has things in place for that, but unfortunately, a lot of military people military veterans especially, they don't want to reach out because they think that they can handle things by themselves. So when we have the opportunity to speak at events or anything related to that, we always try to ensure them that there's not a weakness. It's not anything that they need to be ashamed of if they need to reach out for help. This is what we're here for. We have I guess fortunately, unfortunately, we have a lot of support groups that have actually dealt with suicidal families or had to deal with suicide and their grief. So we always have that available for families to reach out if they need that. And we also have Department of Mental Health here as well, that we have those resources as well. But we always try to leave some type of resource for them so they can reach out. They always have our numbers if they want to reach out to that. But we do our best to handle that situation before it gets any further with other family members as well. So
thank you so much for that very well thought out and very informative response. Dr. Schwartz, you're next up. How do mental health issues impact individuals within the criminal justice system, and what are some effective interventions? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry about that. I forgot. So it's important to know that approximately half of the forensic population of the United States has some form of mental illness. Um, it's a smaller percentage, 15 to 25% have serious mental illness, which would be something like schizophrenia, other psychotic disorders, major depressive disorder, and things like that, bipolar disorder. But the other side of it is that up to half have some form of mental health. And then the issue becomes when you're involved with the criminal justice system, that can also exacerbate any mental health condition that you might have or create one for you. But we do see a lot of people with mental health issues in the criminal justice system. And there's a cycle of recidivism there. One thing that complicates it is the co-occurrence of substance abuse disorders, some substance use disorders. A lot of times when people are suffering with mental health issues, they self-medicate, whether because they can't afford the medication, and this is what is available to them, or it's just become a coping mechanism from early on. Maybe the illicit drugs that they can get hold of don't have the same side effects as some heavy-duty psychotropic drugs. And effective interventions, diversion programs where there's maybe mental health courts that are devoted, drug courts. So I'm in Florida. Unfortunately, in Florida, there's not a lot of resources like in some other places. But here in Miami-Dade, where I am, I'm in city of Miami. We do have both a mental health court and a substance abuse court, and those are very successful. The statistics on those are that they're really, really helpful in getting people with mental health issues on their feet and working and reducing recidivism rates with the mental health population. Also, anything that has trauma-informed care. We really underestimate the effect that trauma has, the impact that trauma has on not only creating mental health issues, but exacerbating mental health issues, and as a standalone mental health issue. So really anything that where the practitioners understand the nature and effects of trauma and how to deal with that in helping to resolve some of the issues. And this is something that we hear all the time. You know, I'm a psychologist. We beat this drum loudly. We have to have more access to psychiatric care. This really shouldn't be the burden of the criminal justice system. If the criminal justice system is dealing with it, then that's a signal that in our communities, we don't have good access to mental health care for people that would theoretically help them avoid contact with the criminal justice system.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Again, very, very thorough response and very detailed. Thank you for that. Next up, Professor Watson. How do agencies help families manage the impact of loss due to mental illness?
So when I'm not teaching at Purdue Global, I work for an agency part-time, and they send me into the women's prison in Michigan. So I do substance abuse groups in the women's prison. And as was mentioned, you see a lot of co-occurring disorders and a lot of trauma. And for the most part, I'm working with the women in there, not their families, but I'm very aware of their families. You know, they picket outside the prison on weekends, and the children deal with the loss of their parents in their lives. And I hear all about the families regularly. But I pretty much balance my time between students and clients, and my clients are incarcerated.
Thank you so much. And the
Welcome.
next question is for Judge Smith. What do you see as the most significant challenges faced by criminal justice practitioners when dealing with individuals experiencing mental health issues?
That's a great question, and thank you for an opportunity to be here and to answer it. I really appreciate it. I also just wanted to mention I appreciate the chat that's going on. I've been following it real time, and I want to extend my gratitude to all veterans who are on this call, as well as family members of veterans, and just acknowledge that we're talking about, you know, a lot of segments of our population who are both struggling but also thriving. And I'm really grateful that we're able to see people being serviced in the way that they deserve after serving our country in that way. So thank you very much to them. Okay, so the challenges that we have are many. First of all, there's a challenge of just getting people through the door. And I appreciate the comment about pride, just as it pertains to veterans, for example. Like, that was an interesting segue into this conversation. There's certainly pride among all populations, but that exists as well with lawyers. And sometimes pride is really just fear masked, right? And so we have a lot of the criminal justice population and our justice partners who are scared to delve into the world of mental health because it feels so intimidating to break into it. And you don't want to be the only person in the room who doesn't understand the lingo and doesn't understand all the acronyms that all these clinicians and therapists and psychiatrists and psychologists use to talk about this population. And so I am one of those people who practiced fear of a stigma is absolutely fair as well. I'm looking at the chat. You're absolutely right. So I'm one of those people. I practiced for a couple decades as a public defender. And what I did with my clients, who I thought I was doing the best job for, was once I determined that there was a severe and persistent mental health diagnosis present, I would ship them to mental health court. And I wouldn't see them again unless they were sent back to me or they were ultimately reoffended and back in the criminal justice system. And that was a disservice to my clients at the time. And then as a judge, I was challenged to take over mental health court and drug court and mental health diversion and competency court by my last presiding judge. And she pushed me in there very much against my will. And I kept explaining, I didn't practice this as a lawyer for a reason. This is not my specialty. And she said, just do it for a year. I think that you will enjoy it. And now, almost 8 years later, this is what I love. It's my passion. And the intersection between criminal justice and mental health is so, so important. So it's a long way of saying we've got to get people through the door and not afraid of what we don't understand. And so I think that's the biggest hurdle that I've seen so far. There are many others, and funding is a huge piece, making sure that there's adequate and sufficient access to both mental and medical care is really important. The stigma that was mentioned in the chat is so very important because we still have a lot of growth that's happening within the recovery population, and specifically when it comes to substance use. And we have
tonight, 8/7 Central and streaming on Paramount Plus.
I don't know what that is, but if you guys heard that, that wasn't me, and I'm not promoting Paramount Plus. So anyway, I think that answers the question. If that's
It does,
okay.
and thank you for also sharing a little bit about how you got in the field. I appreciate that. And also acknowledging the veterans. I thank you for that as well. Our next question is for Detective Almy. How are crisis intervention teams integrated into law enforcement patrol and investigation division?
Thanks. Crisis intervention teams are, it's probably easiest if I start with a bit of a definition, and they are police officers who receive extra training, usually a minimum of a 40-hour class in helping to understand mental health issues, in de-escalation, in crisis negotiation skills, and in learning what the resources are that are available within our communities. And the way that they get integrated, generally speaking, is you have officers on a patrol team or detectives who have this extra training. And when there are mental health crisis calls, a lot of them, when they're dispatched, are obviously going to be mental health related. And we try to get a crisis intervention officer to those. Or officers on the scene might get there, realize that it's a mental health call, and they will call for a crisis intervention officer to come assist. The way we do it in Northbrook now is we've also integrated a follow-up capacity where our crisis intervention officers will help to mitigate whatever the immediate crisis is. They'll help to try and de-escalate things, get the person who's in crisis to agree to go for help at the hospital, even if it's going to be an involuntary petition. We always want them to go compliantly. My team last year, I was actually very proud of it. We had 0 uses of force in over 200 calls that we attended, but 0 physical uses of force where we had to take someone to the hospital. Once we do that, though, for people who live in town or whose families live here in Northbrook, our crisis intervention officers work with our full-time social workers that we have here at the department, and they will follow up with the families to try and do a little bit of a debrief on what happened at the crisis call, why the police might have acted the way that they did, and then to make sure that the family and the person in crisis are getting the resources that they need. And we've had a lot of luck using this model with reducing the frequency of calls at some of our more frequent residences that we would attend. We had, just as an example, one person who lives here in town that was the subject of 27 calls over a 4.5-week period. And after we ended up intervening, ultimately had to get a judge's writ to have him committed to a hospital. But once he was back out, that number dropped steeply, and we deal with him every few weeks now, and we have a much better relationship actually with him after that. He knows he can talk to us, and he trusts us, and he'll tell us when he's off his meds. He'll say, "Hey, I'm off my meds. I need some help now," and he'll reach out to us.
Thank you so much for, I mean, I don't know if you saw the chats, but people were very impressed. So thank you for sharing that with us. Next, we go back to Christine Keeney. How do you collaborate with law enforcement, forensic psychologists, and medical professionals in cases where mental health is a significant factor in the decedent's death?
Well, we have several, well, we do, as you know, we work with several agencies, and we have a um, a group every month, and we deal with drug addiction and drug overdoses, and that's our overdose review board. We have that, and then we also have our suicide prevention board as well. We deal with, I know I was looking at some of the comments about when I mentioned about the veterans and things like that. Thank you all for your service, by the way. We are trying to not only go with the VA, because I did see some things on there that we, they don't provide a lot of the services for our veterans. And so we have a group that the prevention board, that we have the VA, people from the VA, we have people from mental health, we have law enforcement agencies that we team up with to try to do our best to see what we can do to prevent these things from happening. There's not a whole lot of things in place at the moment for us anyway, just because we're trying to work on what the main causes are. Is it PTSD? Is it, financial issues? Is it, we want to know what the main concern is, so that we can try to prevent these things from happening. Again, we put the resources out there, and we do meet with Berkeley County Mental Health, and hopefully get some of this our agencies out there, so we can help with the families and anybody. The problem is that we are getting there too late, and that's the problem, is how do we prevent it from happening? And we're still kind of in the early stages of these support groups, and of these these meetings that we're doing, these groups that we're with, everybody has great ideas, but nobody knows how to stop it from happening as of yet. And, until you meet with people that are going through things, we have a lot of these agencies together, but we don't have anybody that's coming forward to us, asking how do we help them? And that's where we're at right now. So we don't have a lot of things in place, unfortunately, but we are working on that, and we're trying to prevent things from happening, and try to get ahead of the game, and try to help people out before they think this is their last resort. So
Thank you. Prevention is key, right? But how do you prevent?
that's
the
right.
$1 million question.
Right.
And again, I want to let the panelists know, if you see a comment that you want to respond to, you can just say, I'd like to respond to the student's post. You're welcome to do that. Next question is for Dr. Schwartz. What are some successful models or programs that integrate mental health services into the criminal justice system?
That's a really good question. Some of the more successful mental health models, and it's been touched on already. At the heart of it, regardless of the model, the collaboration is important. There really needs to be a very strong collaboration between mental health professionals and criminal justice professionals. That this is key because one of the issues that we talked about already, crisis intervention teams. This is a fantastic model. It trains police officers to be able to handle, hopefully successfully, and the data shows that it is successful when it's implemented, any sort of mental health crisis. But it really does require a strong collaboration, because one of the things that comes up a lot, and this comes up with judges, not just law enforcement, with judges, with attorneys who are representing clients in criminal justice matters, there's a level of competence, and I'm not talking about competence from the mental health perspective, right? Because that's a whole different concept. It's about the training, right? So I always tell my judges and my lawyers and even law enforcement officers when I talk to them and do trainings that I wouldn't be able to go out and arrest somebody because I don't know how to do that. I haven't had your training. I wouldn't be able to try a case in criminal court or any court, because I'm not a lawyer. I didn't go to law school. And certainly, as much as I would like to be a judge and tell everybody what to do, I don't have that training or those credentials either, right? So let's work together, because I have a certain training set and a set of credentials, and then you have yours, and let's all work together to try to figure this out in the best way to go about it. And so I think that's what's going to be the foundation of any successful model. But again, crisis intervention teams, mental health courts are incredibly successful because it deals specifically with those mental health issues. And as Judge Smith had already talked about, when you're immersed in something, you do get up to speed pretty quickly with the lingo, with seeing things over and over, and how to manage that. And so I do think specialization would be important in various education programs, right? So instead of just sending somebody to law school, we'll just make law school like 15 years or something. I'm joking, of course. But where there's a track that you can really specialize in something like mental health or substance abuse, or, whatever it is that you're interested in. Jail diversion programs are also very successful. And I can't stress this enough. We do a pretty good job nationwide of dealing with things after they happen. And up until reentry programs. Reentry programs are few and far between. And a lot of this is not because people don't care. You all are here because you care and this is of interest to you. We're here because we work in the field and we want to share with you and hear from you too. But at the end of the day, if we don't have resources, there's only so much any of us can do. And so reentry programs have to be really, really heavily resourced to keep people from reoffending, from falling off the wagon, so to speak, right? Starting to use again, for dealing with the trauma of the reentry, because that can be a major adjustment for people, especially if maybe they weren't sober or they weren't on their medication before they went in. And so addressing that. But prevention, I think we have to do a lot more with prevention before it ever gets to the point where the criminal justice system is being used as the new mental asylum, right? Dealing with people who maybe really aren't committing crimes, but this is where we have to deal with them because they're crimes of nuisance. Like, for example, we just had a law passed in Florida where it's a crime to sleep on the street. Well, what do you do if you're homeless and you don't, there's no shelter with space, right? So now you're going to be sent to jail, and now you have a criminal record and you really didn't commit a crime. You've just got some issues, right? So I think collaboration and resources would be the most important factors for any sort of programs.
If I add on to that, would you mind? There were some great comments coming in the chat, and so I wanted to bring them to Dr. Schwartz's attention as well, because she was giving such a wonderful response, and I appreciate it. What she described was staying in our lane, which I learned very early on in my role as a mental health court judge, and I have no problem with you telling us all to stay in our lane. It is so important. It was the first lesson of significance. You're right, there are a lot of judges who would resist that because they would want to be in charge. I agree with you. We have to find a way to let go of what we can't control and stay in our lane, but also collaborate, which is really counterintuitive in a lot of ways, except it's not, because there's training locally, there's training within our respective jurisdictions, there's national training. All Rise is available across the country and is such a wonderful resource for those of us on the bench, out in the streets and practicing. There was a question from the group about specifically whether you were talking about reintegrating into the community from a jail setting, custodial setting, or a mental health setting. So I wanted to just see if you wanted to touch on that. And then to your point about resources, one thing that we found is really, really challenging in areas where we have overpopulation within our jails is that a lot of folks are getting released early and without notice. And so that's tricky because those individuals who are really seeking that mental health assistance while they're in custody and are getting their medications regularly, they may not be on an injection, they may be on another antipsychotic medication that's oral, and then all of a sudden they're on the street. And so being able to provide that wraparound and a service and then bridge medications as well as communicate, to your point, and have some type of electronic system that is within the jail system but available to the behavioral health organization in each county has proven to be really effective for us. So I just wanted to bring that to Dr. Schwartz's attention so she could address further if she wanted to.
Yeah, I mean, what I would say to that is that's a really good point, because not everybody's released from jails and prisons. They might be released from mental health facilities. I think that's probably Judge Smith and I are on opposite sides of the country, and I think our states are about as different as they can be. I should really be a Californian, to be honest. But
no
yeah,
problems over here right now, no fires or anything.
yeah. So, and so a lot of what you're able to access depends on the jurisdiction. I know in California that a great deal of emphasis is placed on the humanity and on those sorts of social services, right? And recognizing the needs for those. Whereas in my state and some other states, it's less so, right? Whether it's a political issue or not this is not for me to decide. It just is what it is. So we have to work with what we have. But I would say that being released from a mental health facility, there's still the stigma that's associated with being released from a jail or a prison. I would say that, and in terms of psychologically, I think that these individuals are going to deal with the same sorts of challenges, right? It's a major transition and it's scary. A big difference, though, is no one will really know if you're released from a mental health facility unless you tell them. That's not going to be available in public records, whereas your criminal record is. And in Florida, we have a very broad public records law, so everything is available online. But also with the advent of the internet and Google, you know, and websites like mugshots.com, if somebody's arrested, you can find that out, and you may not ever know the disposition of the case, right? So there's that added stigma there too, and people might not really realize that there's a mental health concern. But those are all really great comments. And as you guys can tell, I could talk about this forever, all day long. So I apologize for that.
Not at all. I appreciate all of the camaraderie, the comments in the chat, the questions, and the next question is for Professor Watson. And Professor Watson, this actually comes from a student. Oh, and I had it right here.
Can I read it? I think I got it.
Absolutely.
During incarceration, are there many programs who advocate for prisoners' mental health, as is how strong is their support system? So this is definitely why they bring me in there. I, along with many other counselors, social workers, psychologists, go in there to run groups. There's many different group facilitators, many different classes for them. And some of them really thrive in the classes. You know, you get all kinds of motivation levels in these classes, and you get people at all different stages of recovery. Some that aren't even necessarily having a substance abuse disorder probably find their way into my classes because they administer the SASE, a substance abuse screening assessment. And if the inmate has any history of substance use, they'll likely make their way into my class. So I get I get inmates that, you know, maybe drank a little or smoked some cannabis in their lives, as opposed to many women addicted to meth. Meth is very big in Michigan from what I see in the prison. We see a lot of opioid use disorder, a lot of times beginning with a prescription from a doctor that turns into addiction. And some of the women are very motivated and they really thrive in the group and take on a lot of leadership. And it's a really good feeling because when they finish my group, that makes them look good to the parole board. And some women can't even leave prison till they finish the group. So that puts pressure on me, especially when they're not doing well. Like I have a couple not doing well in my group right now, and it's so hard to, you know, allow them to fail, and some of them will. And in Michigan, there's right now a bill that's been going through the Senate and the House whereby inmates get days taken off their sentence for completing these groups and classes. And from what I've heard, it made it through the Senate. It did not make it through the House. So it's pending at this point. And the prisoners, that they're hoping and hoping, they really got their heart set on this passing, because Good Time, from what I understand, did not make it to the ballot in Michigan, which again would have given time off their sentence for time served without conduct tickets. So the help is there, but do they want it? Do they want to take advantage of it? Are they ready? Is the question.
So much. Next question is for Detective Salmi. How can we improve training for law enforcement, court personnel, and correctional officers to better handle situations involving individuals with mental illness?
It's a big question. I think that's the big question in law enforcement now, is how do we improve that kind of training? How do we roll it out more broadly? And I think the number one answer is money. And I think that everybody on the panel here would probably agree that the number one problem we deal with is there's not enough funding for mental health in most of our states. I know here in Illinois, the number of state-funded beds in mental health hospitals is insanely low. It's only in the triple digits for a population of millions of people. And so far, we've had a hard time convincing legislators that this is a worthwhile spend. especially in the wake of the defund the police movement a few years ago. We're having to push to say, hey, not only is defund not the right idea, but we need more money. If you want high quality police officers, we have to train, and training isn't free, unfortunately. So I think the number one thing is convincing the legislatures and village boards and city councils and all the people making those decisions about the purse strings to provide the funding that it takes to get police officers to training. Because when an officer is not training, when an officer is not working because he's at training, that costs money too, because that agency still has to fill that hole. We still have to have police officers working the street. That's the number one thing. Secondarily to that, I would say a lot of it is just education, just making people more aware of the fact that law enforcement has a role to play here. Illinois is starting to get out of the business of having police officers as mental health first responders, and I think it's probably going to work well if they implement it properly as things go. But for right now, we're the first line for a lot of people. We're the first contact people are going to have. And so we need to make people more aware of the fact that police officers need to have this training, that corrections needs to have this training. Something that people don't realize is, I know it's been said by a couple other panelists, just how many people who are incarcerated have mental illness. Cook County Jail, which is our local jail here, is known as the largest mental health hospital in the country, or mental health facility, I should say, in the country. They deal with it constantly, and the corrections officers there have to be well versed in it, in all aspects of responding to mental health. So I think those are the two big things I would say: money and awareness.
Can I also add to that? I promise I will be brief, I promise. I think it's important to put some context on it because this comes up so much more and more, especially with more awareness about mental health issues and body worn cameras. And now we all see what goes on, right? But we blame the police a lot. We say, well, I mean, come on, they need training to know how to deal with mentally ill people. And I want to put some context here. I went to school for a decade, right? And I will tell you that my first day out of school to be a psychologist, I wasn't ready yet either. And then you have to do practicum and internship and things like that. And it takes many years, right? And the same with police officers and many other fields. It takes a while to develop your expertise. So to put it just on law enforcement and say, well, what can law enforcement do better? Or what do we need to do to get law enforcement to be better? Well, not every law enforcement officer is going to be able to go to school and get the training, nor would they have that interest, right? So maybe it's not really a law enforcement problem as much as it's a community mental health problem. And again, we come back to resources and things like that. But I think it's the recognition and the context to say, well, we can't expect police officers to be and do everything. They're there to keep us safe and make sure that justice is served. That I'm not saying there shouldn't be trainings. Of course there has to be awareness trainings, but I think we have to stop laying all that responsibility on other stakeholders.
Yeah, I appreciate the response to both of you guys. Thank you so much. The next question is for Christine again. How do you approach sensitive cases such as deaths involving police use of force or in custody fatalities, particularly when mental health might have played a role?
If it's a law enforcement related death, regardless whether law enforcement had to use force or if they were the victim of that, SLED is usually who handles our police cases. However, we do have family members who are that we work with that are with our agencies, our law enforcement agencies, and we have family members that we have to respond to. We treat everybody exactly the same way. We treat everybody with respect. It doesn't matter if it's a homeless guy or if it's somebody from our law enforcement or if it's, an 80-year-old grandpa. We treat everybody exactly the same way because our job is to find out, one, what happened to the person, but also we have to be supportive for that family as well. Regardless the situation, we, you know, we treat everything as appropriately as we can. Again, sometimes we have even child cases that we know the parents had something to do with it, but we can't be that person. We have to focus on that child or that person that has passed away. So we're very sensitive to treating families with respect and helping them throughout this grief process. It's not just that we're on the scene, and law enforcement is exactly the same way. They don't do that either. They tend to what they need to do, and they also, I know a lot of our officers catch up with the families and follow up with the families to make sure they're doing okay, and we do as well. I know personally with my cases, I usually give them about a week, and then I'll call them to find out to make sure they're okay, see if they need any resources. Are they grieving okay? Are they doing what they're supposed to do? You know, because some people don't grieve until 6 months later, and we need to make sure that they're still doing okay. And again, our law enforcement agencies do the same thing. I know someone on here asked if they had victim advocates for cases, for victim cases, but we have advocates for mental health. We have advocates for the victims. We have everything lined up if they need it, and we're there for them. And they always have they can reach out to our office if they need to. And again, with law enforcement too, we work really close with our agencies, so everybody knows that we're all on the same page. They're not looking at the law enforcement agencies negatively. We speak with the families together. We say the same things. We react the same way, just to make sure that the families know that we are a team. And again, if we have to like I said, going back to the main question, I know I kind of got off track there, but our SLED agency is the one who deals with any law enforcement things, but we still, again, have to respect the family and do what they need to do and provide resources for them.
But you got a lot of claps.
Oh, thanks. I can't hear that, so thanks.
Right, yeah, they're virtual.
Okay.
And Judge Smith, your next question. How effective are mental health courts in reducing recidivism compared to traditional criminal courts?
Sure. Thank you for that question. It depends on who you ask, and it depends on from what vantage point you're considering success. But recidivism, I've heard different statistics, and from different jurisdictions, I think it does vary. And I think whoever's collecting the data, also that can create a little bit of a variable. So I don't have a solid number, but I have a tremendous amount of success stories that I've personally been able to observe, which is the reason why I've ended up here as long as I have. And even though there's tragedy and we lose people and it's heartbreaking along the way, the reason why I have stuck with this now for 8 years is because of the success and because of lives that get turned around. So we have mental health court, which is a probationary based program. So someone will plead guilty to an offense and then enter into that mental health court program with wraparound services that include probation officers and their oversight during a period of about 18 months. So that's sort of the standard in California. And we also have mental health diversion, which is a statute that was passed in about 2018. And it is very I don't know. It's not a problem per se, but it's always up for amendments. It's always up for cleanup bills. I'm on a committee for judges across the state, and we provide insight to legislators about proposed legislation and amendments specific to mental health diversion, because the idea is, I guess, a little bit shocking to some, which is that pre-plea individuals are eligible for mental health diversion, which is a 2-year program for felony cases. The only excluded offenses are statutorily excluded offenses are murder, rape, explosive devices, things like that. But otherwise, all criminal offenses are technically eligible for consideration. And if someone can demonstrate to the court that they have a severe and persistent diagnosis pursuant to DSM-5, and that there is some type of connection between that diagnosis and then the criminal offense that's been alleged against them, and they can provide a suitable treatment plan to the court to address the mental health needs or co-occurring mental health needs of that individual, then the individual is eligible for pre-plea diversion. And so that means that we get to work with those people for 2 years. They come in and they see me every month, and we sit and talk about what they've been up to for the month before they came in, what successes they've experienced, what setbacks or challenges they've endured, and then potentially what relapses may have occurred as well. And we learn from each other. We do it in a group setting so that everybody gets the benefit of the experience of their peers. And so anyway, I think that there's a lot of insight that's gained through that. And now I forget what the call to question was. I'm so sorry. What was the original question?
I think you did a fantastic job answering it.
Great.
I think
Perfect.
Thank you.
We'll go with that.
Okay. We are getting close to time, and I definitely want to make sure we have another question for Detective Palmy. What is the protocol for using force when interacting with individuals with mental health challenges?
That's a tricky one. The short answer is the protocol for using force regarding somebody with a mental health issue and somebody who isn't is exactly the same. Our officers are trained to protect themselves, to protect other people. The amount of force that can be used varies from situation to situation, obviously. And whether that force has to be used varies from situation to situation. You see a lot of reports in the media where, unfortunately, somebody who's experiencing a mental health crisis ends up at on the wrong end of a police use of force. And something that I frequently see commenters saying is, well, but he had a mental illness, but he was in crisis, but he was schizophrenic or autistic. And unfortunately, those things don't make the person any less dangerous for the police officer or for their family. What we're really trying to do with our crisis intervention training and a lot of the other mental health related trainings here is really pushing hard to teach officers to recognize those situations and whether they can be de-escalated, which is in and of itself a big skill, because we talk a lot about de-escalation and not, I think, enough about the fact that it's a two-party situation, a two-way street. I have to have a willing partner in de-escalation. But we're trying to train officers to recognize those things, to be able to de-escalate those situations, and to avoid using force where we don't have to, because we're well aware of the fact that there are times where we're legally authorized to use force, but maybe someone didn't have to. I call those the lawful but awful situations, where an officer's not getting prosecuted for it. He's maybe not going to lose his job for it. Technically speaking, he was within the rules, but I look at that body cam footage and go, man, you didn't have to do that. This could have gone a different way. And so, it's on us as police officers to be calling each other out when we see those situations. For me, as a sergeant, as a supervisor here in my department, as a leader among police officers, that's something I take pretty seriously, to have those conversations with other officers and say, hey, we can do better than this next time around.
Thank you so much for that. And I think we have time for one more question for Dr. Schwartz, and then we'll turn it over to Jean Morrow to close this out. Dr. Schwartz, what special considerations are taken when providing mental health services to clients who are convicted or facing charges?
So, that kind of depends on what the nature of the crime is, right? So I work predominantly on murder cases and crimes of violence, right? So those, and I think it's important that everyone know, if you don't already, this is a pretty educated room, though, judging by the chat. It's really nice that most seriously mentally ill people are not violent. They are not. Only about 4%. There was a meta-analysis done in 2015 that showed that only about 4% of seriously mentally ill individuals with psychotic disorders, bipolar disorder, these individuals were so much more likely, 11 times more likely, to be the victims of violence than to be perpetrators of violence. And so when you're dealing, and I think that's an important thing to really put out there, because we have this stereotype that especially seriously mentally ill people are automatically dangerous, and they are more likely to be the victims of violent crime themselves. But when you're dealing with people who commit crimes of violence, like I said, very often I'm not dealing with somebody who has a psychotic disorder or bipolar disorder. I'm dealing with someone who maybe has personality disorders like antisocial personality disorders, psychopathy, things like that. And so the way that they're handled, they're never those, I think that was touched on already, they are never going to mental health court, right? They are going straight through the regular criminal justice court system and going to face their lumps. But when you're talking about crimes such as, well, at the most basic, like I mentioned earlier, sleeping on the street, right? They're going to be most likely dealt with in either mental health court if they have a diagnosis or if they can get a diagnosis by the jail psychiatrist. Or in substance abuse court, sometimes veterans court. That was touched on earlier. We do
I
have
didn't have time to get in and log in on my computer, so I just stayed in here.
Oh, nice.
Right. So veterans court, veterans came up. Many jurisdictions have veterans courts to deal with their very specialized needs. And so the considerations are, I think, number one, just in dealing with people in general, empathy, right? Understanding that this is their life experience. This is what they're going through. We might not believe it. We might not understand it. But it doesn't mean that it's not very real for them, and just treating people with, some professionalism, right? If you're the provider in that situation, looking at them with an eye toward empathy, and how we might be able to help them and get them into a better place where they're not going to be a danger to self or others going forward. And really trying to understand what services are out there that might best serve them. I think those are the main special considerations. And again, if it's beyond your level of expertise, I'm not an expert in everything mental health, right? I work with forensic population. So if I was asked to do something in family and marriage counseling, well, I mean, forget it. This is just not what I do, so you have to know the limits of your own expertise. And even sometimes with cases that come my way, sometimes I have to pass on them because even though it might be within my expertise, I might not be the right person for the case for whatever reason, right? Because mental health professionals and other stakeholders in the criminal justice system, we're people too. We have triggers too, right? So sometimes you're just not the right person for the job. And I think that's a special consideration that people need to be realistic about.
Thank you, everyone. The panelists, you guys are such experts in the field. You've opened my eyes. I had no idea like what the ones that are severely mentally ill are not likely to be the ones committing the violent crimes. So I appreciate all the insight, and all the students and the participants. Thank you for all the great questions. You had many great questions, and unfortunately we would need all day to answer them, but I wish we had all day to do so. With that in mind, I am going to turn it over to Jean Morrow so she can close this out.
Thank you so much, Catherine. We really appreciate you serving as moderator. I'm Jean Morrow. I am the co-advisor for the Psychology Club. And on behalf of our club and the Public Safety Club, I'd like to extend our sincere gratitude to our esteemed panelists. This has been so wonderful getting to hear about your experiences and your specialties. And I'd also like to thank everyone who was able to attend. You guys have asked really wonderful questions, and I encourage those of you who are in club the conversation further. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a lovely evening.